Welcome to Leaders and Learners. My name is Tanya McKenzie, and you can find me at the intersection of public relations and leadership. Join us as we talk to organizational leaders, elected officials, experts, authors, artists, and personalities, sharing their stories, talking about how they got to where they are and how they continue to learn and lead the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Greetings, good people. It's your girl T, your PR priestess, here with another amazing leader. Okay, I'm so excited to bring her on. I have so many questions because the work she's doing is it's culture changing. And there's a lot of work to be done in the culture. So this conversation is relatively important and impactful if, in fact, you too understand the changes that need to take place in work culture, Black culture, educational culture. Lots of work to be done. Where do you fit in? Do you ever think about that? Where do you fit in when it comes to change that needs to happen? Where's your impact? And do you ever need help with that? Do you ever need help being guided along the path of how you too have impact on the cultures that you are directly involved in, your work, your school, even your community? All of that actually matters. Before we get into her, I want to remind you all that I have an Instagram Live, The Spin Cycle, because we talk about this often when we're looking at the media. People have stopped reading these days. Like, the fine details of reading something has just gone out the window. They take a headline and they just run with it. And what winds up happening is you miss the fine points, you miss the details, you miss all of the things behind the deadline. So behind the headline. So make sure if you get a chance on Tuesdays or even the ones that you've missed, we have the Spin Cycle on Instagram Live on Tuesdays with other PR pros, people in entertainment and the media, helping you understand how to break down some of the media fluff that you get, leaving you to kind of miss some of the finer points and some of the finer details of things that you should know about, whether it's in your culture, in the news, things that are going on in your community. Headlines are great, but knowing the story is important. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our girl, Miss Sacha Thompson. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Tanya. How are you?
I am so excited to be here with you at this point because you're going to talk about some things and break some things down that I feel like people really, really need to understand. So I want you, in your own words, to talk about your business and why the equation part. You know, you start talking about equations, girl, and numbers, and people they run the other way. They don't want to talk about numbers. They don't want to add nothing up. But the way that you present the information, I've seen some of your work. It's important, and numbers do matter, especially when we're talking about, our corporate culture, when we're talking about representation and why that matters. So let people know about your business and what's the equation about.
Absolutely. So the equity equation, what we do is we really focus on helping organizations curate inclusive environments where everyone feels valued, seen, heard, and connected. And so for so many leaders, it's all about the data. And we try to do that in a way that not only brings them the data and the numbers, but also allows them to connect to each other as human beings. Because that's a part of all of this work that I think is missing, right? Like, we're forgetting the human side of things. And so when I talk about the equity equation, what that actually comes from is we've been talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's been really focused on diversity, like just bringing in diverse populations, and inclusion, but equity is how you get there, right? Equity is removing barriers and providing support. And so that's the hard work. And that's the work that we really try to help organizations connect to, right? What does it mean to actually get in there and do the work? And some of that work is kind of messy, but we allow them the opportunity to kind of learn and grow and create opportunities where they're doing it in that mess, and it's okay, right? It's not, there's no fear of saying they're doing the wrong thing, because we're providing you with the tools and resources and support that you need to be able to work through all of those challenges together. Oh, I can't hear you. That's okay.
So with all of this and all of the data that has been collected and all of the numbers that come in showing why diversity is so important and how it actually helps your bottom line, there are
Mhm.
still business owners and decision makers that are like, I ain't with it. I don't
Yeah.
want no parts of it. And you can keep your color and all of the things that come with it outside of my building. How do
Yep.
you even explain that or get past those hurdles?
Well, first of all, those aren't the people that I'm trying to work with, right? If you're going to fight this, then I know that anyone that's coming into your organization is going to have a difficult time. So, number one, I work with folks that actually want to do this the right way. The second thing is the numbers don't lie, right? So, we have seen research time and time again that organizations that are more inclusive, and we can talk about what that actually means, organizations that are more inclusive have an 80% rate of having their employees more engaged, right? Innovation is higher in these organizations. They're actually able to get to audiences and to customers and to clients that they weren't able to do before they've actually focused on being more inclusive. So the numbers don't lie here. It is very beneficial to the bottom line to focus on building inclusion into the work. Now, I say that in that it's more than just your employees. It is what you're doing with your customers, your clients, what you're doing in the community, what you're doing within your industry. All of that is part of this work. So when I hear, oh, someone in our HR department is taking care of this, that's very narrow minded because DEI, this work actually needs to be part of your company DNA. It needs to be touched by every single aspect of your company, especially if they're touching customers and clients that are diverse populations.
What is usually happening in a company for someone to come to you or someone in your position
Mm.
to say, I don't know, I might need to bring you in?
So it's funny, most of the work, I would say 90% of the work that we do at the equity equation is focused on psychological safety. And that's usually I get a call, hey, Sasha, someone has come to our office or our team and they're saying they don't feel psychologically safe. We just did some type of what's the word? Employee engagement survey, right? And that's come up. Psychological safety is low for us. We don't trust, or they don't trust our leaders. Those are the types of phrases that we typically get when we get called in.
Mm.
And I absolutely love that because what we do is we actually do an assessment of the psychological safety of that organization. But we don't do it just at the organizational level. We do it at the department level. So by that team leader, we do it by demographics. So now you're getting a better understanding of who's not psychologically safe, right? If there's specific leaders that are creating psychological unsafety within the organization, and then we can kind of work with that, right? So it's one thing to say, oh, we're not psychologically safe. It's another thing to be able to pinpoint exactly what behaviors are taking place that's creating that, so you can mitigate those behaviors and actually create some type of process or procedure to ensure that that's not part of your company culture.
Dummy that down for me. Dummy that down for the audience.
Which part?
The psychologically unsafe. I know what you're saying, but for people that don't have the vocabulary for that or the understanding.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when I talk about psychological safety, it's the ability to be able to speak up without fear of retribution or harm. Right? So in its simplest terms, that's what it is. Most organizations will say, "Oh yeah, absolutely. Anyone can speak up. They can speak their mind. There's First Amendment rights, all of these things." But it's that last part of being able to do so without retribution or harm. Now, that's not to say speaking up and be rude or speaking up and demean someone. It's speaking up when you see that there's an opportunity to do something new or different or to shift a way or a process that's probably been ineffective, right? And being able to do that and thinking, okay, if I share this thought or idea, what's going to come back on me? Is what's going to come back on me going to harm me? Am I going to be yelled at? Am I going to be demeaned in any way? Am I going to get demoted? Right. And so people are playing with those thoughts in their minds within their organizations. Is it worth the risk of me speaking up? And so if that risk is there, you're probably not going to get the best out of the people that are on your team. When that risk is removed, you start to see people think about things in more innovative ways and creative ways, and you get the absolute best from them.
Well, okay. So since
It's a lot. It's a lot.
it is a lot because we know exactly what you're talking about. I don't think there's anyone that watches this or hears you that does not understand exactly what it is you do and why that's important. But since the George Floyd incident, when everything seemed to be on the rise when it comes to let's be more inclusive, let's, have more voices in the decision making process, those numbers have declined.
Yep.
Many companies have shown their performative side. They have shown that they are reactive, not proactive to the culture that might be harmful in their organization. So, how do you get the companies that you work with to continue the work? Because they'll bring you in because somebody done said, okay, I don't feel safe. I feel like I'm going to lose my job. So now they're scared. So let's act like we care. So we're going to bring someone in to help us have these difficult conversations. Then we're going to move on. And 6 months later, that person and somebody else are feeling like they've been ostracized because of how they feel. What do you do to prevent, or can you prevent a company from backtracking or being performative? And you put in all this work to help educate them on why this is important.
It's accountability, which is one of those words that we talk about, but very few organizations actually have something in place when it comes to this work. So when we do these assessments, it's not that we're just coming in to do these assessments. We also provide one-on-one coaching to those leaders, right? So now they have a partner. There's an investment in you becoming a more inclusive leader with your team. So we have our coaches come in for 6 to 8 months, depending on the work that we're doing. We do that with them one-on-one, but we also provide some other resources, guidance, support to the company as a whole throughout this time period. And then we do a reassessment. But part of that conversation that I'm having with the leadership and the team that's brought us in is, what does accountability look like in this space, right? So if someone gets a second score that's lower than the first score, right, which tells us they are not creating psychologically safe environments for their teams, what does accountability look like? And so that's a different conversation that they've probably never had before, right? So usually Bob, who's probably great at sales, has probably had bad behavior and has been rewarded because of the sales, but not because of the bad behavior. And it's been overlooked. Now in this process, it's okay. Bob might be great in sales, but Bob sucks over here as a leader, right? What does that look like at the end of the day? And so we start to have those conversations and communicate that early on. The second assessment's coming in 8 months. If your scores do not improve, this is what that looks like for you, right? So some of it may be you don't get all of your bonus. Some of it may be, other things, depending on the culture of the organization. But that's part of this whole process, right? And so what we're talking about is, how do we shift behaviors, right? How do we shift how people show up? And when we're talking about, especially now in this post-pandemic workplace, what employees want is very different, right? We heard about quiet quitting. We heard about folks that are just like, nope, I'm not even trying to be in this crazy environment. It costs a lot of money to try to replace someone. So what's better, to keep trying to replace someone at $50,000 a pop, right? Because that's the bare minimum to replace someone, or to make sure that your leaders have the tools and resources that they need to be successful business partners in this, right? And creating these environments that people want to stay in, right? So you shift the business message there.
So I'm going to take you to pop culture really quick. My question is, how do you get leaders to hold themselves accountable? But I want you to focus on, this is very pop culture, Lizzo and Chris Brown. Follow me.
Okay.
So you have Lizzo dealing with her issues with all the people that have worked with and for her. Yeah. And as bad as people talk about, let's say, a Chris Brown, I haven't seen any complaints about anyone that has worked with him, that has legitimately worked with him. Like, there's a level of employee satisfaction, obviously, for them to not have complained. So
Mhm.
who is there, even when you're looking at people that powerful, because over the last 10 years, people are starting to place more complaints on the head of the head of the fish.
Yep.
So how do you hold the leader? How does the leader hold themselves accountable? And in that situation with those two, doesn't it make sense? Does it make sense for, let's say, a Lizzo to continue to say, it ain't me, it's them, it ain't me, it's them? Because even in offices, it's going to
Mhm.
be the boss that's like, yeah, I don't know, I'll just fire everybody. It ain't me,
Mhm.
it's them.
It kind of goes back to what I was just saying, right? So one of this, the accountability is, have you done the self-reflection on yourself? Right. So that's why we do the coaching. Like, have you taken ownership of who you are and how you show up in this space? Because many of us see what we want to see when we look in that mirror. And it isn't until we get that feedback from several different people and places that we're like, okay, wait a minute, there's a consistent pattern here. Maybe it is me. Um, so that's part of it. And you have to be willing and open to accept that feedback. If you're not willing to accept that feedback and you're constantly going to blame someone else, then that tells you the type of leadership that's going on in that organization. And if you need to then make the decision if that's where you want to stay, right? Because every single good leader, inclusive leader, is always going to be self-reflective and always going to be willing to shift and change based on the feedback that they're getting. So the whole Lizzo situation, it was very interesting to me because I'm like, wait a minute, you're hearing this from several different people. Um, there's more to unpack here. Because again, how it was coming out, we were only hearing one side. We're hearing, no, this isn't me. That's an organization I would really want to do a lot more digging into to figure out, okay, what exactly is showing up and what behaviors and what values are being held. Because oftentimes that's too part of the challenge is what I hold as near and dear to me as being part of my values may not be the same values that someone else has. And there's misalignment there, or an organization, and there's misalignment there. So that's a big part of it. The other part of that is, as employees, we have to do our own process of understanding who we are and how we want to show up and how we want to work, right? Again, it goes back to our own values. And so if there's misalignment there, you have to be willing to know where you're drawing the line in the sand for what I'm going to accept as acceptable behavior and what I'm not. So in any situation, be it Chris Brown, even though, there's issues with him, and what you're saying is no one that's ever worked for him has said anything bad. Is that they haven't said anything bad because they've had a good working relationship, or is it psychologically unsafe for them to say something bad because they know there's repercussions if they do, right? So that's two different ways to look at that.
And I think I just brought that up because he just released this newest video and it had everyone that he had worked with from the past in that video. And it was touching to me because I wonder how many bosses, how many leaders, how many owners can really say that everyone that was with them on their journey would still be with them today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And, I was saying to someone the other day, I can't say that I've left companies because I had bad managers, right? I had great managers with good intentions. They probably just didn't have the skill set needed and required to deal with a Black woman on their team. Right?
I like that.
That's the nuance there. They had good intentions. And I mean, I honestly can say I've had some really heartfelt managers that they were just right there. But the situations that came to me, they didn't know how to deal with. Right. And that often is the case, right? That's often the case. We talked about me having worked in an organization in California. I was the first Black female that company had hired. I was employee 36.
Been there.
And there was a situation that happened. I don't even think I was there a good 6 months. And I was just like, wow, okay. So this is what we're doing.
So quick story. I worked for a private club out in Walnut Creek, and the owner's daughter used to stare at me. I was an operations manager, and the owner's daughter used to stare at me in meetings all the time. It was, I used to feel after a while, I'm like, what are you looking at? What,
Right.
what? And she said, I've never been around Black people before. And I had a moment because I was like, so now how do I react to her saying in California? Because people think racism does not exist in California. In California, she has never been around Black people. She has passed by them. She has maybe driven past them, but she has never encountered or been in
In
close
community.
proximity with Black people before. That was a very telling moment for me, and I was very young in my career, but it has definitely given me perspective in that, yes, people don't always know how to deal with something that is different from themselves. So whether it be Black women or Indian men or whatever, if it's not something that you have been in close proximity with, it may cause you to act a certain type of way. So, this work that you're doing, I think when people hear, DEI and diversity and inclusion, these days they get very put off.
Political. Yep.
What is that fear? Like, what is that fear?
It's exactly what you just said. Fear of the unknown.
But people eat things they've never eaten before every day. We taste something new every so often, at least, you might not know what it is, but you at least ease up into it. You don't just, oh no, I'm not doing that. Because we can't grow if we don't try new things. Right.
Right.
So
But
do
when
you
you
find
think
yourself
about
having to, even when an organization brings you in, I'm guessing there's other people in the room that are not receptive to your presence or what you're bringing into the room, even if the leader brings you in. So how do you melt that ice?
I call it sneaking in the vegetables.
Okay.
Right. So and that's why, I think the psychological safety work hits differently than if I was to come in and say I was a DEI practitioner.
Got it.
Right. If I talk about psychological safety and everyone wanting to feel valued, seen, heard, and connected, nobody can disagree with that. The first stage of psychological safety is inclusion. So I talk about what does that feel like to be excluded, right? And I have people talk about their experiences, and I'm like, talk about when you were a kid on the playground and you were the last one to be selected. What did that feel like? What emotions came up for you? And what you start to do is you connect people get out of their head and start to connect to their emotions in their heart.
And their humanity.
Right? And we start talking about these stories and people start telling their experiences and telling their stories. And then you go into, so when you think about how the brain processes pain, that social rejection, our brain processes that the very same way it does physical pain. So if you have someone in your office that's always left off of an email or left out of a meeting, or there's a project that they're supposed to be on, but they keep being forgotten about, their brain processes that as physical pain every single time. And who do you know that wants to operate like that every single day? Right? So now we go back from that heart back to the head and like, oh, wait a minute. Is there someone on my team that's actually experiencing this?
Right. And am I playing a part in that?
Am I playing a part in it? Right. And so what can you do? How can you help create an environment where everyone feels valued, seen, heard, and connected, regardless of their background?
I like that.
Right. So we take them right into their own childhood and emotion and kind of bring them along. Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes.
Take you hopping around a bit. Affirmative action. So the numbers, like we said, numbers don't lie.
Numbers don't lie.
White women have benefited more from affirmative action than anyone else.
Yes.
Why is this a Black issue? Explain that to me.
So when you think about when affirmative action was created, so back in the 1960s, 50s, 60s, when this was created, the actual purpose of it was to create opportunities for Black people, honestly, to get more access, right, into work environments because they were being left out of the process. That's what affirmative action was built upon. What has happened over time is it became minoritized groups, right? In which, depending on who you're talking to, women become a big part of that. So now when you have women, race tends to get pushed off of the plate, right? And other aspects of the identity gets pushed off the plate. And so what was happening was, oh, well, I'm a woman. I need to be able to get access to X, Y, and Z. And though that might be the chairman's wife, daughter, sister, whoever, that was an affirmative action hire. That is what ended up happening, right? So now you're looking at nepotism as a part of affirmative action, right? So it's interesting because when the Supreme Court came down with, race-based admission needs to go from college campuses, my first reaction was, great. So let's get rid of legacy, right? Because when you think about legacy, 85% of those that come in through legacy are white men, right? So you're starting to see now some colleges push back on, we're getting rid of our legacy admission process.
Yeah.
We're rethinking how we're doing this. We're looking now at economic challenges, right? That will actually bring in more underrepresented racial minorities, disability, probably more than anything else.
Right.
Right. So it's like, if this is the equity work. This is how do you balance this equation? If you're going to take this away, then what else needs to come into play?
So let me ask you this then. As a people, again, even though the numbers show in all of the equations, it still equals better with more diversity. And there are people that are still like, no, I don't want no parts of it. Why are we, as people of color, still trying to get into rooms that people don't want us in?
Listen.
When there are other rooms that we are welcomed in, that we thrive in, that we are celebrated in, that we can have impact in. From your perspective, why do we still fight to be in rooms that do not want us in there?
Two things immediately come to mind. One, we still have this slave mentality of because it's better than what we have, right? So that's all tied back to that slave time frame
mindset. Yep.
The second part of that is there's some, and I can kind of agree with it to a point, that is you can't tell me what I can and cannot do.
Yes.
Right. And I'm going to do this, and I'm going to prove to you that I'm bigger and better than you once I get there. Right. So we're battling those things. I am one now of the mindset that I'm never going back to the corporate space. Like I've been there, done that, had a couple of different industries that I worked in. What are some of
the biggest companies you've worked in? What are some of the largest companies you've worked in?
One I can't say.
Okay. All right. We'll leave that right there.
One I can't say. But I mean, I worked in higher education. So that's why the affirmative action thing is so top of mind for me, because I started my career in higher education. I worked for a nonprofit, an educational nonprofit, for several years, and I worked in the tech industry for the last 10 years of my career. And again, that's small startups, small companies to large behemoth, national companies, running national international teams. I'm never going back. And I say that because my wellness and self-care is a top priority for me. And when I was in those spaces, particularly when I was doing this type of work in those spaces, I realized the weaponization of exactly what's happening in affirmative action, right? There were several I was working with a white woman who was leading diversity, equity, and inclusion and had never done the work before and was proud to tell people she had never done the work before, right? So But because she had never done the work before, that means she had never done the work on herself either. So she's showing up and causing harm in places and spaces, not realizing that you're basically burning everything down that you touch. And having gone through that experience where I'm now developing ulcers and hair's falling out and insomnia and all of these other things, I was just like, if I'm falling apart physically, I can't show up for anybody. I can't even show up for myself. Once I removed myself from those environments and created a space where I was honored, where I felt I saw my value and I understood and I knew my value, and I can pick and choose the type of clients that I want to work with, right? That will, again, honor and respect me. Things have changed. Things have absolutely shifted. My health, I'm probably healthier now than I was 10 years ago. Right. And so it's because I had to prioritize myself in this space. And I tell people all the time, excuse me, as a coach, what's more important to you? Right? How do you want to show up? How are you manifesting your values in the work that you do? And we start to talk about these things in a way where there's so many people. I had one client in particular. I need to do this. I need to do this in tech, right? Became a scrum master and all this other stuff. And I'm like, what brings you joy?
Do you even know anymore?
Right. Like what fills your cup? What are you excited about? And it was photography.
Had nothing to do with his job.
Nothing to do with it. And now she has a gallery, and doing all these things with photography. And so I'm of this mindset that we as Black people in particular have been sold this bill of goods that we cannot be successful unless we work for the man.
Not only that, but I have friends that have fought the good fight, got into Ivy League school, and wind up having mental breakdowns. So it is important to, as much as you want to, set the standard and break down barriers, your mental health and your soul and your spirit has to be right.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what you have left. So whatever room you wind up, whatever door you kick down, when you're in that room, how do you feel? That,
right.
It kind of matters, especially if you mentally, you need that nourishment and you need that inspiration. And if it's not in there, get out. Get OUT. Before I let you out of here,
yes,
I got a couple questions. My little speed round. Sometimes I deal with people I like.
Okay, I'm ready.
Anita or Patty?
Ooh, Patty.
Okay. LA or the Bay?
The Bay.
I had to do it. Prince or Michael?
Oh, Prince.
Oh, really?
Prince.
I have moments of, Mike doing his thing at the award shows with my mom. And okay, you're right, though. But Prince, yeah.
One of the last concerts I saw, that I remember was Prince. And
yeah, he's it. I ain't even been to one of Mike's. I've been to Prince. I haven't been to Mike. So, it was two. I didn't want to pass out or start crying or anything.
Yeah, I almost passed out and cried, and I was a grown woman at Prince.
Oh my God. And then Pepsi or Coke?
Neither.
What is it? What's your fix? What's your caffeine fix?
I don't do caffeine. This is, I got natural high. I don't need nothing else.
Look what happens when you leave a job you hate. No, I'm just kidding.
I got green tea.
All right. Last one. Ronnie, Bobby, Ricky, Mike, Ralph, or Johnny?
See, that's a trick question.
Come on, man. You got to come.
Because I was a Ralph girl for like the longest time. I was a Ralph girl. And then when he left and it was just BBD, then I was Ricky. Mm-hmm. But then Ralph is coming out with some good stuff now. And I'm like, I don't know.
With Johnny right now. So nice.
Say again?
He has a song with Johnny right now.
I know. Listen.
So nice. So nice.
Yeah. But anytime they are around, I'm going to their, we're at those concerts.
So you just can't choose?
I just go to all of them.
All right.
And then hope that Bobby shows up.
He was at the last show. He did really well. He would walk off stage though when you could tell he needed his inhaler. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Well, listen, tell the people how to get in touch with you, stay in touch with you, bring you into their organization, or just follow your journey.
Absolutely. So the best way to get in contact with me is through LinkedIn, actually. So Sacha Thompson, just look me up. You'll find me there, the Inclusive Culture Curator. You can also go to my website, www.theequityequationllc.com. Or I didn't even mention this one, the Equity Leadership Institute.com, which we are providing certifications in inclusive leadership to folks. And we're doing one actually in California in October. So definitely go to that website, and then you can check out my podcast, DEI After 5. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you find your favorite podcast.
Hey guys, I went ahead and put her information is scrolling down here at the bottom for her podcast. We didn't actually get into it, but I want you to go check it out. Check out her pod, see what she's talking about, get connected, find ways that you can help level the field and make sure the math is math. And when you're trying to do your equation, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of my most popular ones is white women doing this work. So I've had a conversation about that. I have one on social justice and what that looks like in this work. So yeah, and I talk to a lot of therapists too. So what does burnout look like? So, yeah.
Many of y'all
we have all the conversation.
I love it. I love it. So make sure you show up, you show out, you get connected, and you have those important conversations. Thank you, Sacha, again for
Thank you for having me.
And we plan on staying connected with you and following your work and continuing to cheer you on. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good day. All right, guys, I wasn't kidding. Make sure you go to her website. The ticker down here is showing you exactly where to go. Give some thought to how you play a role in the environments that you are in. It is not always just about at your job, in your community. Are you a part of different community organizations? Do you hold leadership on a board? Are you on the PTA? What do those rooms look like? Just imagine how much better organizations run when there is a level of equity in the room. And it's not always about color. It's about the voices and perspective. Like, stop running from perspective. Have difficult conversations that have amazing outcomes. Don't be afraid. Hopefully ain't nobody gonna bite, but it's okay to have some of those difficult conversations, because at the end of the day, the work is done and everybody is better for it. All right. So thank you guys for showing up. Make sure you like and share, subscribe, all that cool stuff. And we'll see you back here soon. Leaders and learners. Thanks so much, guys. Talk soon. Hey, thanks for showing up to the podcast where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. When you get a sec, take a moment, leave a comment. What you think about today's episode, and share it with someone that you know could use the gems that were dropped today. Follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss who's coming up next. You never know who could show up here and what they could say. For your professional needs, marketing, PR, communications, and leadership, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Sand and Shores, or hit us up at sandandshores.com. Again, thanks so much for showing up. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.